Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. Daniel McAdams is with us today as co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
Doing fine. The big thing in the news here in the last 24 hours has been this tragedy in New York City.
Terrible.
Some crazy nut driving his truck through town and killing, 8 people and injuring 15, and he got everybody's attention. Matter of fact, in some ways, he got a lot of attention, and there's other things that we should get some attention to as well. So this is horrible, and it'll be sorted out and find out whether Al-Qaeda really sent the message down there, and ISIS said this is your job, and he got orders from somebody. It may be a lone wolf, or it may be somebody who's a bit psychotic, and sometimes I get impressed with the psychosis of people because not many normal people, commit suicide and then do something crazy like this. So, but then again, it raises the question, we spend a lot of money on surveillance, and we're on the receiving end of that. All we have to do is go to the airport.
Yeah.
Did they miss this one? Did they know anything about him? I won't be surprised, but in a bit, in another week or so, that we might realize that the FBI actually knew about him but missed it. We've heard those stories before. So the tens, maybe $100 billion spent on surveillance of the American people doesn't seem to always play out. And then sometimes you wonder if they know there's going to be an incident. Maybe there's a complicity with the two where we'll watch them until it happens or something like that. There's always room for conspiracy thinking. But I just think that this is a horrible mess, but we won't dwell on that, but we'll probably talk a little bit about some of the horrible other messes that we are involved with that we can do something about.
Yeah, and it's a very, it's an event that captures everyone's attention. It's a very dramatic event. You're driving down a bike trail. You're right. Most of the time, we do see that these people were known to the FBI, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. Again, in this situation.
I'd like to just visit a little bit about what's going on in Yemen. That's in the news. It's been in the news for a long time. And I was thinking back to the first time I made a statement on Yemen was back in the year 2000 after the USS Cole was hit. Yeah. And 38 people were killed, or 40 were killed, a lot of injury, military. That was a big event, and the ship had to be hauled back to the United States. And I was on an interview program, a national interview program, and I said, what are we doing there? Why do we have these missile ships, in Yemen? Oh, well, we're refueling and things like that. Well, we shouldn't be exposing ourselves like that. Well, the only thing I remember very clearly, I don't think I won the argument, but I knew I was challenged severely, and that's when I was on the receiving end of saying, oh, you're just anti-Semitic. You hate Israel, and that's why you won't support that. And that annoyed me at the time, because I was thinking only about our foreign policy of non-intervention, which, for a long time I've been thinking about that, and I continue to think about that. But Yemen is still in the news, and it's a serious problem. But we have some legislation introduced by Thomas Massey and Walter Jones and a couple Democrats, and they might have 38 people have co-sponsored it, and they're trying to say enough is enough. 17 years or more being involved in that and supporting Saudi Arabia in this battle. It's time to come home. Of course, there's a lot of places we can come home, but this resolution is brought up under the War Powers Resolution, and it's a concurrent resolution, and it's mandated that it can be brought to the House floor. There will be a vote, but the final version of it could be modified, and I think that's what's going on right now because it is in the news.
Yeah, there is a provision in the, to have these. And I think you and Mr. Kucinich did it quite a bit during the Iraq War. Several of these privilege motions would come up that have to go to the floor, and this is HCON Res 81, House Concurrent Resolution 81 is the name of it, and it does address this long-standing tragedy that was really made much worse in 2015 when the Saudis invaded Yemen. They claimed it was a proxy war against Iran because the Houthis, who had overthrown the government that was backed by the Saudis, they claimed are really just Iranian puppets, which of course is not the case. It's not the case now, but of course U.S. and Saudi policy is pushing them in that direction. If you know, so
Yeah.
it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You know, most of the time when we heard there was military involvement, we went, where's the authority coming? Because we always knew there probably wouldn't be any. But, you know, the administration and probably the previous administrations stand behind. They have authority, the authority to go after Al Qaeda any place, anywhere. They claim from 2011 and in 9/11 and 2001.
Yeah.
And of course, we've talked about that, and that's just a basket full of excuses to do anything they want. But what is interesting is what they claim under that, they can go any place they want to kill Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda is in this battle, but guess what? They're on our side. Yeah. They're on the side of Saudi Arabia. They're against the Houthis. So we're using the authority to go after Al Qaeda to fight, and they're going to be on our side.
Yeah.
So this is how ridiculous our foreign policy is, and also how ridiculous the War Powers Resolution is. Fortunately, the one provision in here that allows the minority people who are opposed to these wars, like Walter and Thomas and others, to bring this up. So this is one thing that is available, but that whole way of going to war and using the authority to use military force from as a consequence of 9/11. That's terrible.
But you know the bill itself addresses this terrible crisis in Yemen, and if you look at it's one of the worst crises of the 21st century. A quarter of the 28 million people are starving in the country. And this is because the Saudis are blocking the port. They won't let any humanitarian aid come in. A child dies every 10 minutes from cholera, which, I mean, you're a doctor, you know cholera. It's a preventable,
Horrible.
It's a treatable issue with a saline drip or something. I mean, it's a totally treatable thing.
No, that could be treated. It wouldn't exist without our activity there. So that's really a huge problem. And right now, we're going to continue with this. I don't see what's going to happen. I'm delighted they're having this debate, but right now they're trying to water down the resolution because they have to vote on something, and if something passes, it'll be totally watered down and not mean anything. But that's what's going on right now. But the real tragedy there, and one of the points I think it's legitimate to make it, but the risk is if we compare New York City with this. And they think that we're saying, the tragedy in New York City, we're downplaying, we don't care about it.
Yeah.
But if you compare what happened in New York, what we participate and we're in many ways responsible for in Yemen, our money and
weapons,
equipment and everything else. I mean, it is a fair comparison to make. And there were times, and I made the comparison, on the bombing on 9/11, that it was blowback, that it was very direct. I don't happen to think that's the case here. I think this is closer, like I said, a lone wolf operation or some crazy nut that is using it as an excuse. But nevertheless, he himself said something to say, well, I'm part of ISIS. I'm speaking for ISIS, and it goes on. But and once again, it's the image and the propaganda. Just think of the propaganda from yesterday on it probably is not exactly propaganda, but the effort to use this incident to really galvanize people to maybe even undergo our civil liberties even more, to catch these guys. So that is related. But my problem is you don't see the nightly stories in Vietnam. The Vietnam War, they started being nightly stories of all the tragedies going on and the suffering. But no, if you saw a picture of that, you're not going to say, guess what, American people, this is your policy. You pay for this, and you're supporting this and supporting Saudi Arabia.
And even if our media doesn't cover what's happening in Yemen, and certainly not from the angle that we're allied with the Saudis and with Al Qaeda, as you point out, this isn't conspiracy thinking. Anyone can Google this. Mainstream sources have reported on it. Foreign Policy magazine, others have reported on the Al Qaeda benefiting. This is simply to point out that, our foreign policy has consequences overseas. The rest of the world knows it. It's not to downplay New York, but it's to try to understand how people, even twisted people, may view this foreign policy. They say that 1 million people by the end of the year may be infected with cholera, affected by cholera in Yemen. 1 million people are going to be suffering. Why? Because the Saudis hate the Iranians and they want to punish people who they view as being tied to the Iranians. That is a horrible, horrible thing.
And then on top of the cholera epidemic, you have the starvation going on. And of course, the starvation facilitates infections too, and it just multiplies. But we never change policies. We just keep doing it. And it is the obsession with the Sunni faction, along with Israel and the United States, against Iran.
Yeah.
And that is continuing. So unless people understand that and say that neutrality under this situation would be so superior to what we're doing now, continuing to support this type of tragedy, and then and not even having desire to know more about what's going on elsewhere in the world. But how many people know about this horrible thing that happened yesterday? Yeah, everybody knows it. Yeah. Everybody knows about it, and it is horrible. Compared to what?
Yeah. So getting back to the H-Con Res 81, it's a resolution, privilege resolution that'll go to the floor. It's pretty simple, and you're saying the War Powers resolution is mostly bad, but this is one little good thing in it. But what it does is it simply states, the H-Con Res 81, simply states that the U.S. must remove itself from any hostilities in Yemen not directly related to fighting Al-Qaeda. I guess that means not supporting, but that's okay. It's not as strong probably if you had written the resolution, but it makes that point, which is a legal point. The thing that's amazing is that, and we saw this piece in The Intercept. Lee Fang wrote a good piece. Steny Hoyer, the minority whip in the House, he is telling Democrats, do not co-sponsor this bill. And actually, in Fang's piece, notice that Lawrence Wilkerson, who's on the board of the Institute, a good friend of ours, a great friend of peace, he said he's been making the rounds on Capitol Hill to try to drum up, especially Democrats and Republicans both, to co-sponsor it. And he's being told over and over that Hoyer is blocking us, won't let us co-sponsor it, won't let us back it. And Hoyer's office didn't even deny that they're doing this. So This is what's going on behind the scenes. Don't you dare shut down this war.
Yeah, and Hoyer, we know what he's doing, but he also said he knows he can't stop the vote, and he's not even trying to do that. But believe me, they're going to water it down. Yeah. And I find it interesting that they are a little bit more excited about this than some of the times when Dennis and I would do this, because we couldn't get very many votes. But they have, nearly 40 co-sponsored. That's pretty good.
That is good.
And maybe they're getting worried, about this. Maybe the people are waking up more so, and hopefully we contribute to this waking people up about the tragedy of Yemen. But somebody will come along, and I'm sure you'll hear it in the debate. Yeah, you're right. It's bad. But won't it get a lot worse if we're not there?
Yeah.
No, it won't. It won't get a lot worse. Maybe if we got out of there, Saudi Arabia might have to reconsider it.
And we're not in the business of endorsing or opposing specific pieces of legislation, but certainly people talking to their representatives about this war and urging them to oppose this war and do everything they can is a good thing. I mean, I think if any of these members got 50 or 60 calls to the DC office or even to the district offices, they would take notice. Take notice.
They'll take notice, but guess what? There's a couple other lobbyists in Washington, and those lobbyists are going to be very, very busy, and they have to do with military and other countries that are very eager, and they speak loudly, and they donate a lot of money. But you're right. If enough people speak out, are we at that point where finally the American people said about Vietnam, enough is enough, and it did end. They defunded it, and after many years of tragedies and 60,000 American deaths. So maybe we're reaching that point. It's hard to say, but it is very good that the debate is coming up. It's sad that it's necessary, because they shouldn't have ever gone in. It's sad that we don't have a perfect vehicle, but this is the best they have, and that resolution was passed. I think it was the best part of that was that when people finally wake up, they can do it by demanding a debate and bring it to the House floor. And I don't know if they've done it very much in the last few years using this, but I'm delighted that Walter and Thomas is doing this.
And that's what scares them the most, because this is a bipartisan. That's what terrifies them. When you have Republicans, Democrats, you're supposed to stay on the reservation.
Yeah.
You know, that's what worries them the most. But can you imagine living in Steny Hoyer's district and having this person as your representative who is so calloused, he's so calculating, he's so devoted to politics, he puts it above a million people's lives. You know, it's horrible. But I do want to close by thanking everyone for our October book sale, Dr. Paul's endorsed books. We had a huge turnout, Dr. Paul, and we're grateful to everyone who made a donation to the Institute. Your books will be on the way very soon, and look for another offer in the near future.
Very good. And I want to thank the audience for joining us today. Once again, we're talking about foreign policy, but in lieu of this terrible tragedy in New York City, trying to, look at them both objectively, and with the risk of always looking like, oh, maybe these guys don't even care about that, which is absolutely false, because not only would our foreign policy prevent many things like this happening, as well as 9/11, it would also prevent the many, many deaths of Americans in the last 15 or 20 years. But just think, if you're somewhat leans toward being a humanitarian, you might think, well, maybe our bombs and missiles and all the killing, hundreds of thousands of people have died at the hands of our foreign policy, especially since the 1990. So I would say that this is a legitimate position to take. It's a legitimate position for the American people to hold. It is very pro-American, it's very pro-constitutional, it's very moral, and that is to mind our own business, take care of our affairs, and work hard to be friends with other countries and actually trade and talk with them, rather than always looking for an antagonism and threatening our so-called adversaries. Threats and intimidations are one thing, but if they go along with us, we shouldn't give them a lot of money. If they oppose us, we shouldn't bomb them. We should continue to work with those people who have no threat to us. And right now, I am absolutely convinced there is no threat any place in the world for anybody to come and start bombing or invading the United States. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.